And there we go. All right, so I think that looks perfect. We're good to go. We can get started here. So all I've done on these miniatures so far is paint them this base blue color. It is the Vallejo model color sky blue. And then I've applied a thin gloss coat on from Army Painter. The base is literally not going to be important. Someone else actually did the base before I started painting this. But we did the gloss coat, which means we're going to be doing one thing, which is gloss coat washes. We're actually going to highlight this down quite a bit using blues, purples, grays, and greens. So the first thing that I want to do is actually make a gray wash. We're going to be making the wash ourselves out of acrylic pigment. So I'm going to be taking some of this deep taupe color here on the palette. Not too much. We don't need a lot of it. So one brushful probably is all you're looking for. We're then going to add 2 drops of the Army Painter Quick Shade Wash Mixing Medium. But of course, 2 drops of that. And then out of the dropper bottle, we're going to throw in 2 drops of clean water. 3 drops, since we went a little heavy-handed there. Sorry about the camera. All right, so mix this all together. Really well. Now, this should be relatively runny. We're going to do the classic thumb test here. Looks perfect to me. So this should be hopefully darker. If it's not, I'll add like 1 drop of umber into it, just so we know for sure. There we go. Oh, and it was 2 drops. All right, I'm just messing up completely here. But it should be all right. Now it's just going to be more brown off that deep taupe color. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pick random areas to begin with to start applying the wash. And what's going to be interesting about what we're doing is, since we did the gloss coat, of course, the wash that we're applying is not actually going to tone down that blue, and instead it's going to sort of intensify it. So just on certain areas of these, we're going to be applying the gray wash. I don't necessarily have a plan for kind of where I'm applying the gray. Maybe on the sort of around the faces at first, we'll do that, because that's the thing too. Remember, we can actually build the washes up to different colors after we start to allow these to dry. So I'm going to start applying this wash, and you can see what it's doing, right? It's really not an intense color. So how about we do the face like so, and then just beginning to go down the arm just a little bit. That's where we're going to apply the grays. So right around the edges of the skulls. Now these models are actually from my personal death army. So not for a client or anything, so we're just gonna have fun with it, see what kind of cool stuff we can make it do. All right, so I think that's pretty good, and that way we'll be able to do crazy color transitions down the actual back of its like head type of situation. Then of course highlighting back up to that blue. So moving on to this part of the skull face up here. Hope everybody's having a good day so far. If you're able to have any cool Halloween plans or anything like that. Today is my mother's birthday, so my Halloween plans are always a family get-together. Alright. So I think that's pretty good, at least for the beginning of what we're trying to do. And you can see sort of on some of the areas where the pigment's drying. What's nice about the Quick Shade wash medium is that it's a resin, so whenever you apply it to a gloss, it actually dulls it out. But so that's pretty much the only spot I want to apply this. Now I will do the underside of these, which was pretty painstaking to actually get in and paint, I will say. But just gonna apply that in there, and I have the feeling we'll go way darker. But just for now, I'll throw it in. So not a lot of crazy detail that we're worried about here, just literally trying to darken it up on the inside. Alright, that's good enough for me. So now that we have done our gray, we can begin to start moving on to different shades and tones. So you can kind of get the effect that we're starting right here. Anywhere where it's pooled pretty heavily, I'm going to move it around really quick. Even though I probably could have started that a little bit sooner, making sure it wasn't pooling all crazy, we can still fix a lot of it right here. Nothing that we can't fix, so not too concerned. Alright, then on the arms a little heavy. There we go. Alright. So, we have applied those. So next, I think going in for some type of purple before we start going into blue would actually work. Been doing a lot of purple washes lately. I don't know why exactly. So we're going to start it off with the actual purple tone as a portion of the base color we're going to use. But I'm going to mix it with this Reaper Master Series Pale Violet Red color to transition both. So I'm going to take a little bit of all of the colors here, mix them together, grab some of this gray wash we've made, mix it in. And since we're finished with the gray wash, we can actually just start pulling from it quite a bit. I'm going to add a little bit more of the Quick Shade mixing medium. So, I make my own washes, I buy washes, for a lot of different washes, like for large batch quantities, I just make them and mix them in here. If you Google or YouTube making your own washes, or I believe a decent video is also making your own, I think, Nuln oil from Games Workshop. You'll get the recipe to mix it with the matte medium and the liquid separator and all that stuff, and that's what I use. But the method that we're using right now is using the Army Painter Quick Shade Wash mixing medium, which allows you to also make your own washes. Alright, so we have started off with that gray. You can see how it's drying right there. So it didn't touch the sharpest highlight points because we did the gloss coat underneath it. So now what we're doing is we're going to see if this purple will match it tonally, and I think it does. It looks pretty good so far. So I'm going to start taking it out, but not too crazy. Out and into parts of the gray wash that we had already applied. So, I mean, this is more of like a, I don't know, at this point I would call it like a deep pastel lavender. So it's really not purple, but that's at least the color I was attempting. So just going to apply that in there. And I am applying it so thin. One thing that's nice about the Quick Shade mixing medium is that it does help things dry super fast as well. So that way we're going to be able to go in and reshade most of the actual recesses in these colors really fast. A lot of these techniques too are involved whenever you do layering. The next kind of class session on my Patreon is going to be all about doing that. So if that's something you're interested in, you can check out my Patreon as well. It's brand new, but every single week we do certain things. I also raffle off a display level painted miniature on the 15th of every month. So there's all kinds of cool stuff going on there. So the idea for this kind of purplish lavender color that we're using is so it ties into the brownish gray that we've already used, and then it will blend into a much deeper blue. And then once we're done with all that, we'll do a darker wash on the underside of all of these, because we're not going to spend a lot of time worrying about the detail underneath them, only the stuff that's visible. And then we will start moving into highlights. So really this process won't take too long. Most of the journey that we're going to be taking here today is going to be worrying about highlights after the shade. Which, if you are one of my patrons, the class that we're doing right now has a lot to do with shading and highlighting back up. Already have a couple videos up there. Gonna do another one for them tomorrow. Alright. So I think I'm pretty pleased here with where we have this kind of lavender wash mixing in at the same time. So you can see it's pretty subtle. So now I will go touch a little bit the backside here, but not a lot. Really just the areas that we're going to see and be able to highlight are kind of what I'm going to concern myself with. Big fan of not painting what you don't see. Alright, so continuing to paint our way up here. Okay, so now one thing that I'm going to do is mix in a bit more of these pigments, but mostly the purple, because that will really tie it in with the blues that we're about to use. So it'll be much more obviously purple. But we're only going to use this in a very small area, so to speak. So if you're kind of color grading it right, like this is right at the end is where we're going to start mixing in the purple, because we're going to use that to actually blend in the blue tone that we're going to start using. So it's a little bit of a trick. We aren't worried too much about the coverage here. We just are focusing on the tone that we're actually achieving, because that's what's going to give us, when we go back in for highlights, really good effects. So that's what we're looking for. Not necessarily trying to do a big heavy wash, even though it will kind of look that way, but once we go back in for highlights, that'll be a different story. Alright, so pretty happy with the way that we're tailing it out, and then we're going to move into much darker washes for the rest of these guys. The washes don't have to be wet. Like whenever I'm doing this transition here, I'm not really concerned about them blending. Because of the way that the quick shade wash medium actually dries, it just layers itself essentially back on top. So not a big deal if you don't think it's layering enough or blending enough or whatever the issue may be. Not that big of a deal. Alright, so now we can start moving into the blues. So I'm going to put him down for a second. Them down, it down. I will use a blue tone base from Army Painter, so that'll be nice. The blue tone base, though, I actually am not a huge fan of. Well, the blue tone in general, so I'm going to mix in a little bit of this Army Painter Crystal Blue. I'm going to use the tip of my brush for that, because I don't want to mix just a ton of it in there. So you can see the amount, right? One fat loaded brush, wiping it off. There we go. Alright, and then after that, I'm going to add, of course, another drop of Quick Shade. There we go. Possibly 2 drops of water. Yeah, we'll do 2. then we'll see how it actually goes. Thanks for hanging out today. Hope everybody's having a good day. Feel free to like my page. I always stream every single day, Monday through Friday, while I'm working on commissions and things like that. I take commissions as well. I also have a Patreon. But other than that, we just like to paint around here. So, we're now going to be applying this blue. The pigment on the blue wash is pretty heavy. But I think that's what we're going for. I want the other parts of its body to appear kind of more physical, if that makes sense, less corporeal. And I do think we will be able to achieve that, so. And I'll be applying this wash heavily on their, like, tails, so to speak. If you're just now joining, we used a gloss coat before these washes, so that's why we're gonna have really, really nice transition effects. Some areas too, I am going back in with this blue, like on the face, just so that we have a base color tying it all together. Because I do want the undertone blue to kind of be the most predominant color that we're using. So that is going to be a little bit important, going back through and kind of just adding dots, things like that, wherever we're going to be doing highlights. So it helps break up the actual miniature. But on this stage, you can really just experiment. You don't have to have a plan. A lot of the times when you're doing cool stuff like this, or like trying to make a cool effect, just going in and experimenting, not being too intimidated will give you really good results, so. And you can see by layering it here specifically, it's actually creating a different purple tone. As these dry, it'll start to stand out a little bit more as well. But until then, it's just going to look like a shiny mess of a ton of washes. Which is sort of the effect we're going for, but definitely not what we're trying to achieve. So layering the pigment in where we've already put it. Here on the back piece, you can see I'm layering it in. After these dry, I may go back in with a deeper blue, like a more of a sapphire blue type situation. Possibly even a deep, deep bluish green, but that'll be just to differentiate their bodies. So like if their bodies are touching, or something like that, I'll be able to go into the cracks, but we're going to have to wait for the major washes to dry. Here in a second too, I'm going to turn on the table fan that I use all the time. That way we won't be waiting here forever. But yeah, the gloss coat really does help. If you've never used a gloss coat before when doing washes, I highly suggest it. If you're able to make your own inks and you can get your hands on some of the Quick Shade medium, highly, highly suggest it. It allows you to create washes that are actually full of pigment instead of the ink pigment, so you get a lot better coverage whenever they start to dry. Just a completely different medium to work in. It's really, really fun. I remember when I bought this stuff, I did a live test on the stream. As soon as I got it in, like today in the mail, I got some Watercolor paints. But since it's not anything like brand new and I know how to use it, right, there's no reason to review it. But this stuff I'd never used. It's a relatively new product, so. All right. So you can see the effect that we're getting here as it starts to dry. Really, really, really beautiful colors. It really helps separate the pigment out while you're using it. So now I just need to make sure I'm going into wherever I haven't put any. And just layer it in real thick. Then we can begin our highlights. And they should, with any luck, begin to, not begin to, but the final look that we're going for is kind of like really iridescent, kind of three-dimensional, really wispy effects. Normally, obviously, the easiest way to paint these is just keep them one tone. I see a lot of greens, right? Because the Night Haunt army is green. And that's easy as well, right? Because you can just use different green washes. You can start with like a neon green, something like that. All right, so I think this effect is pretty much what we're looking for. So I'm going to crank my table fan on real quick right next to me. Shouldn't take too long. Like within 1 minute, it'll be good to go. And then you can see how you can begin to actually layer up the details. But with the black background here with the glove. So you can see, obviously, the transitions. Let's say we're going to focus on this guy's head up top. The shades blend together, right? But obviously the highlight areas aren't super smooth, and that's totally fine because we're going back in anyway. Really all we're focusing on are the areas where the inks are shading together, the washes are shading together. On the back here, you can see it's drying as a pigment and not necessarily a shade. And I mean, it's drying before your eyes. I mean, that's always super exciting watching paint dry. But what area is the camera? Okay. I was trying to figure out what area the camera was looking at because it didn't look like it had enough there. There we go. So just making sure we have enough body. Before we go in doing a bunch of highlights on it. But yeah, so right now it should look like a watercolory mess. But these washes are really high pigment, so it isn't like your traditional wash where you're not really getting much base to work with. Here you are getting quite a bit of a base. I'll go ahead and do the skeleton underneath as well, because I did throw a gloss on him just to be courteous. Hope you guys are having an awesome day, though. Whatever you guys are working on, if you're painting something cool, let me know. If you have any fun Halloween plans, got a game planned, anything like that. Alright, so we'll let him hang out and dry. Let's see how this is looking. So this is actually drying pretty quick. It's pretty much done. The backside's a little bit wet, I'm sure. Actually, no. We're talking, yeah, it's pretty much dry. So one thing I'm tempted to do is an all-over possible wash, maybe, with like Army Painter soft tone. I'm just not 100% sure. Very tempted, though, to say the least. All right. Sorry, somebody sent me a message, so I'm checking it. Alright. So this guy's dry. Extra spooky Ghost Dream Edition. So I'm going to just literally flip this. Oh, the palette's almost dry, but who cares? We're going to flip it over. So I have a nice brand new surface. I'm going to turn off the fan. and we're going to begin highlighting up. And we're going to highlight only between two different colors, so it's going to be pretty insane, but we're going to mix model color, sky blue, all the way up to wolf gray. The wolf gray does look like a bluish white, especially when you pair it next to other blues. All right, so I'm gonna mix quite a bit of this on the palette. So I'm gonna put quite a bit of the model color, sky blue, healthy dose of quick shade. By that I mean 3 fat drops. And then we're gonna put just we'll start with 1 drop of water, then I'll do the glove test. We'll see if I need more. All right, let's swirl it up here. All right, so we're gonna do the thumb check. So it's actually pretty thick there still. So I'm gonna add a little bit more water. 1 more drop. What's interesting too, all that paint I just put on my thumb is dry. That's all dry right now. That's how fast these mixes work when you do them right. Now they don't dry on the palette, but whenever you apply them. All right, so now we're gonna test the thickness here. That's much better. That's what I'm looking for. Way better fade consistency. So, let's get cracking here. Let's begin work on the one on the right. So I'm going to start off with the easiest part, so just directly on the face. This stage, other than shade colors, we're literally just trying to get it up to that first base color. And you'll notice too that the sky blue dries bluer than when it's wet. It actually looks way more white when it's wet. For those wondering, I'm using a size 00 brush. So not super small, but this is the size brush I use for pretty much everything. And if you ever have any questions or anything like that, feel free to ask. No problems with anything like that. So just going to go through these nice thin layers. And you'll see what's going to end up happening here is that while we start to re-base coat everything with the color that we started with, the washes that we applied underneath are going to slowly shine through, and that's the effect that you want whenever you start applying it. The other nice thing about this technique, if you do mess up, so to speak, like let's say you just go a little bit too thick in one area, or you're like, oh, I really shouldn't have covered up that spot, whatever, you can always go back with another wash. Obviously, you'll have to remix it. Like, since I've already kind of flipped this palette, we don't have those washes anymore. I'd have to remake it, but as long as it's relatively quick in the process, you shouldn't, like, forget what you've done, so to speak. So I wouldn't worry about that. Just have fun while you're doing it. So, just nice thin coats. Like I was saying too, what's nice about this stuff is that it dries. So like by the time I'm moving over to another little section of highlights, it's going to be dried on whatever I was on previously, so I can just keep moving around, relayering it if I need to. That also helps keep your highlights really consistent and really smooth. Now I am doing like kind of line work here with the highlights as well. So just using that edge of the brush as I go back in on the top of these little tendril kind of wisps that he has, and you can see that right there. Going back in the larger areas too, applying it super thick so we get tons of pigment on it. All right. So we've started to go back through real simply, highlighting back up on those washes. If I had to guess as well, we are probably going to have a bit of a shine. This blue color is kind of shiny on its own while it dries, but we'll just hit it all with a dull coat. We'll probably use the Army Painter Anti-Shine Matte Varnish, which I would say is probably the best brush-on varnish for that purpose. Obviously, the Tester's Dull Coat spray can is really awesome too, but it's about 40 degrees outside, so I'd rather just use a brush on. You can see it's starting to look pretty good. We're getting the undertone transition colors that we applied. So starting off with that kind of brownish gray right around its face, which interestingly enough looks, to me at least right now, it looks kind of orangish because we placed it next to the purple. That sort of magenta wash that we did after it. So that's kind of weird, but I think it looks good. Getting those two tones interacting. Pretty nice effect. And again, this isn't a commission piece. I'm just having fun since I had some spooky stuff laying around that I could mess with. What's up, Eric? So today, this is a Games Workshop Spirit Host for the Undead faction. So it's like a creature that's made out of 3 different ghostly type things. Nice and spooky for Halloween. Before you joined, all we did was add a bunch of washes to it. We did a gloss coat first before we did the pigment washes. And the washes that we did, we made ourselves with the Army Painter Quick Shade stuff. So now I'm just going back through and layering it back up to the base color that we used. And then once we do that, we'll highlight it up to another color. Which this color is pretty light, but highlighting it up to a white will still help it pop even more. You can see there, that's the effect that we're going for on the tips. You want them to look like they have a little bit more body, and then what would be the best way? It's kind of like a gradient effect where the front is going to be really bright and then the back is going to be really bright, and then you want the washes to create this chromatic, you know, multiple color effect on the inside. So let's move on to his hand. Thanks, Eric. These are really cool models for sure. These are actually probably the hardest miniatures I've put together recently. Some of these my ex girlfriend built, and I remember she was having like a mental breakdown when she was putting them together because they're so fiddly. Pieces snap off of them really quick, but that's the thing. These are newer Games Workshop miniatures, so they're designed on the computer first, so that's how they're able to get these like crazy interwoven details and everything. So I mean, it looks awesome, but man, it was pretty hard to put together. And if I'm remembering right too, they're not that expensive. You get 3 of them in a box, so 3 sets of these miniatures. So as we move to the hands, you can see I'm going to really do a sharp shade transition so that it looks like the hand itself is incorporeal, but the highlight part is like the bone or something. I think you'll see what I mean as I continue it. We're just going for really drastic highlights here, so that way the majority of the hands and everything are going to be the shade tones underneath. There we go. It's just going through doing the knuckles. All the joints in the finger, the tip of the finger. Just trying to keep that effect going. So in some areas, we're not letting the shades, do a lot of the work, and then in other areas, we're letting the shades do pretty much all of the work. That also just helps them look way more dynamic. Alright, gonna clean out my brush here because it's starting to dry. Not at the tip, but at the body. Which doesn't allow it to bend as much. Alright, so now my brush is good to go. Keep it up. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Hope you're having a good day. Hope you've got something cool going on for Halloween. If you don't know what to do, I would just say watch Stranger Things 2. If you haven't already, I know a lot of people immediately binged it. It's a little bit spookier this time around, I would say. So again, on the hands, right, we're letting the wash that we applied do a lot of the heavy lifting. The gloss coat is just a varnish, so any gloss varnish. I mixed it with a little bit of water. Yeah, if you're a painter looking for tutorials, tips, I definitely suggest my Patreon. I mean, it's as cheap as just $3 a month. And then what I do on the Patreon, I speed up the streams that I live stream every day, and then I do voiceover, kind of explaining the thought process. This week, I'm going to have the miniatures from the game Anachrony coming in as a commission, so I'm going to be working on those. So that'll be a lot of good content. I raffle off miniatures every month. I do classes and tutorials in a Facebook group, so people in the group can get feedback directly on the techniques and everything that I use as a commission painter, which is what I do full-time currently. I'm lucky enough. Yeah, I think you get 3 of them for, I want to say it's $20, $21. I mean, it could be cheaper, but if I'm remembering right, it's like $20. I'm not 100% sure on that though. But they look impressive, but in the game itself, they're just kind of like a standard troop choice. Alright, so I would say the front of him is currently finished. So we can start moving around. Work on his tendrils back here. One of them was kind of a little bit iffy on the sides. Alright, I think that's good. Let's move on to another one here. Alright, so let's move on to this dude. So nice thin coats at first. Definitely want that first layer of the brownish gray to show through. What's nice about having the paint the way that it is, the consistency that it is, a lot of the brushwork that I'm doing is just the very tip of the brush. However, because it's so wet and it's so thin from the quick wash medium, that really as soon as the tip of that brush touches the miniature, you're getting really good coverage and you're done. So like you just barely have to graze the edge of the miniature to get the detail. And this color is good for this purpose, mostly because it's so thick with pigment. If it wasn't as heavy with pigment, like if this was an army painter color instead of Vallejo, we may be doing a little bit more work on top. But it's not, so it's just got a ton of pigment in it. Focusing on this tendril. There we go. Looking good. All right, so just like the other hands that we did, right, where it's pretty much just straight lines, and we're using the wash to give it body. We're going to do the same thing on his hands. So this front arm here, straight lines. Nobody fart, nobody sneeze, nobody breathe. Here we go. Of course, it would help if I had paint on the tip. So just like that. And then we're just going to do the knuckles. Haven't decided on what to do with the weapons yet, but we'll get there when we get there. Alright, so moving on to the other side of his head. Well, actually, we can do the back tendril here. Uh-oh, we have a serious Arthur issue currently. He's making his move. He's behind my shoulder, about to be walking on the keyboard, so if the stream disappears, you know what happened. I would move him, but this paint is on the brush. I don't want to lose it. So give me just a second here and I'll move him. Alright, let me move this cat. Because he's going to make a mistake that we don't need. Come here, dude. You should not be there, thank you. Alright. Back to this. Let's see, how long? 48 minutes? Okay, that's not bad. Let me remix this blue up here, make sure it hadn't started to separate on the palette. Alright. Because that would be something that I don't want to deal with. That is also probably going to happen sooner than later, so... I know I'm kind of hopping around right now, but since I'm looking directly at some of these spots, I am going to go in and go ahead and put the paint. Alright. That's the other challenge with this miniature, is the different angles that it gives you. Sort of a nightmare. It makes like reading the miniature, like with your eyes, when you're looking at it, can be pretty difficult. Okay. So, gonna hit the side of his head there. To the best of our ability. Gonna flip him upside down. Talk to him gently. Promise him the world. Not mess up. Alright. Okay. Just really need to double check the direction it was actually going. Because it is confusing as hell right here. Because it's like there's two ridges that combine into one ridge. There we go. What a nightmare of a miniature. No pun intended. Alright, but I do feel like it is looking pretty sweet. So, thanks for hanging out today, everybody that's watching. Once again, we are painting a set of spirit hosts. Not a set, but at least one spirit host model here. Trying to make it look pretty cool, pretty rad. I feel bad for all of the trick-or-treaters this evening because it is supposed to be in the 40s and raining this evening, so sucks to be them, but I know there are going to be a million of them out there. Oh, I got a Snapchat. So, pretty happy with the way that our highlights are coming out. If you're just now joining or you missed the beginning of the stream, it will be re-uploaded to this page. But it'll also be uploaded in 1080p to my YouTube channel as well. Same thing on YouTube, Mini Painting Studio. You can just hit it with the search bar, you'll find me. But if you're just now joining, we started off the day with this miniature painted completely in this same color that we're using right now. I had already applied a gloss varnish to it, and then we applied a ton of washes that looked pretty messy. You can kind of see the effect that it had going on there. So you can still see some of that gloss varnish coming through. Other areas not so much, but we used a like reddish gray color, and then like a scarlet sort of purpley color, then a darker purple, and then a very dark blue. Whoop, dropping him. And after we did that, now we're just going back through and we're applying the actual highlights. We've been painting on this miniature for about an hour now, 57 minutes. So his arm here is sideways, so we're going to do that bone effect that we did on the other one. Where we're just going to do straight up lines, right, on the, not a realistic highlight, but more of a structural highlight. And then just the tips of the fingers, the knuckles. You can see what I did there, right? Putting the very small markings in between. Keep it moving. Tips of the fingers. Full color. Little strokes in between, little dots. Just like that. So that'll be the inside of his hand. Then we can flip it to do the other side as well, but we don't have to do that right this second. All right. So they're looking pretty cool. Now we can do a little bit of the highlight on this underside. The only place I'm going to apply this highlight is going to be where the gloss coat is still shining through, which is a very, 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 very small area. As you can see, leaving mostly that singular blue color. And that way the base of this dude looks way meatier than it really is. Alright, that's pretty much it for that. We don't want it to pull too much from the face of the miniature. Gonna wash out the brush. Starting to stiffen out on me here. From all the different mixing mediums. Alright. So let's stop fiddling around with that. Let's move on to the top dude. Going a little bit more intense on the detail on the top one, just because that one's probably going to be seen from that angle more often. Alright, so what I'm noticing on this one too, the top one, it's just got more exposure. And I think it's just the angle that the sculpt is actually facing on top here. But it's going to allow for a little bit more intense highlighting. Which I think will help the overall look anyway of the paint scheme that we've chosen. If you have any questions about anything, if you've just now joined, feel free to ask. No real secrets here. Of course, I'm sure someone would ask the one question I wouldn't want to answer, but not too many of those. If you're a painter and you're looking for tips, tutorials, whatever, things like that, I do have a Patreon page. You can see that information in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. A lot of the stuff that I talk about are pretty much all the methods that I use for my commission painting. If you ever need anything commission painted, feel free to request a quote. Pretty quick, pretty fast. You can see more pricing information in detail at minipainting.studio/pricing. Or you can just hit the Get a Quote button on the Facebook page. And if you don't care about any of that, I do hope that you would just like the page. That way you can check out all the stuff that I'm working on while I stream. Things like that. Stream Monday through Friday. Either 8:30 a.m. or 2 p.m. Sometimes twice a day. But always usually once a day. Alright, so this arm is pretty straightforward like the other one, so we're just going to paint the edges so that we really accentuate the wash color transition on the middle. Just like that. So people will focus more on the color. It'll give it that incorporeal looking vibe. Gonna focus on the joints and the tips of the fingers again only. Dotting the knuckles. Just like that. So there's his hand. Adding some lines on the larger, broader area right there to kind of break it up. More of an illustrative tactic there than just straight up painting. So you can see what I'm doing here. Painting different lines on the actual tendril before I blend them all together to the same color. You want to be able to take all these different things that we're doing, because remember, this is already a really busy looking miniature. I mean, there's a lot going on. I mean, just look at that. But what you're doing is you're trying to mess with the viewer's ability to pick out the different parts while they're still going to be focusing on the faces, and then they follow the line work that you've done, right, to actually go down its different limbs, arms, stuff like that. Because, yeah, this is a super busy miniature, but it looks pretty sweet. If you're not really good at detailing or things like that, you could probably get away with dry brushing the base color back onto here, and then just reapplying, you know, the coat of that base color on sort of the broader areas like the edges of the skull, things like that. That way you don't have to worry about doing direct line work the whole time. I know that can be pretty intimidating, depending on your skill level. Or if you just don't think it's fun, I mean, no reason to use a technique that you don't think is fun. This painting should be enjoyable. And if you hate painting, by all means, ask for a quote. But, that being said, you should be having a good time painting. Alright, then the tip of this one. So his tendrils right there are finished. So, I mean, I'm pretty pleased with the effect that we got going on here. Thinking it looks pretty ghostly, pretty spooky, pretty scary. Not your typical green, you know, neon green Night Haunt army color scheme that you see frequently, so I think it looks pretty rad. I actually see a whole section here that did not get the wash, which is unfortunate, but I think we should be okay. Yeah, you can't really tell. Alright, so that is, to me, the front of this miniature, arms included, bringing it back to the base color. So since we've been going for an hour and 15 minutes, I will take a short 5-minute break. So I'm going to throw it up to the break screen really quick. Again, if you are interested in any commissions, I'm running a 15% off special that ends this evening. You can always ask for a quote. This would probably be my second tier of paint quality, so not quite display, not tabletop, but heroic. But anywho, I'm going to take a quick break. You can hang out, but I'll be back. All right. And we're back. Welcome back to the extra spooky stream special. Haunted streams only. Alright. So again, I am super pleased with what I have sitting in front of me here. I think the effect's looking pretty rad. So let's turn this puppy around and work on its backside. Ooh, alright. So we have some highlighting to do. We're going to be working kind of in reverse here. Still doing the tips of the tendrils all the way. Going to be doing just loose brush strokes here. We don't have to worry about a thing in the world. Just loose, loose, loose. Who cares? The underside of these, man, we're just worried about showing that wash. So you can see I'm just throwing that paint on there. No reason to care. Everything I'm saying is rhyming. It's got to be the Halloween spirit. So you can see how fast we're going there. I'm really not giving it too much thought. Starting to use a little bit more brain power here on these areas. A lot of people that paint, at least that I've talked to off and on, one of the subjects that always comes up, people always say how painting can be so exhausting. And I mean, obviously, yeah, if you paint for 5 hours, you're going to be exhausted. For a few reasons. One, you're probably not hydrated enough. Two, your eyes get tired. You're straining your eyes if you don't have enough light. Even if you do have enough light, there's only so much your eyes can take. Maybe you have a bad chair. You're not standing up. You're not stretching. That's a big part of it, too. If you don't take a break every 45 minutes or so and stretch your back, walk around, that'll really make it more difficult. But the other thing, too, a lot of people don't realize, it can be pretty mentally taxing to paint. Especially if you're worried about what you're painting and you're having to focus on, like, oh, I don't want to make a mistake, I don't want to mess this up, whatever. Eventually, that'll just wear you out. So you got to loosen up. Now, obviously, it's easy for me to loosen up on this guy because it's not a commission piece. Just having fun. But still, even on commission pieces and when you're working on your own stuff, you have to remember that you are your own worst critic. So if you think you're doing a bad job, if you just finish what you're working on, there's a good chance that whoever sees it next is going to say, wow, I really like this. I think this looks pretty good, you know? Because you're always a lot harder on yourself than, you know, anyone else that would look at it and not immediately recognize the things that you personally don't like about the paint job you've done. So if you don't stress as much, painting's less of a chore, it's less exhausting. So you can see here I'm not using straight lines, I'm just kind of doing these like wobbly highlights. I think that's going to give it even more of a cool kind of arcing effect. I'm going to add some more dots in there, here and there. Because, I mean, this is a haunted, spooky critter. Doesn't have to be ultra realistic. I mean, it's literally a ghost that has ghost knives, so, I mean, come on now. Kind of like a cosmic vibe, I'm realizing too, like little galaxy action, star action, something like that. I don't know. Maybe if I was using yellow instead of the blue, you tell me. I'm not sure, but I think it's kind of spacey at this point. I think it still looks pretty cool though. I mean, Age of Sigmar does have lizards from outer space. That's what the Seraphim are, so they come from the stars. Or at least I still think they do. I mean, that's where lizardmen came from originally. The secret race of lizard people aliens. I'm Alex Jones. But it is funny, the Games Workshop conjured that up so many years ago when they were doing all the lizardmen stuff. So remember too, the further down the back here we get, we're going to do just very, very little edge highlights, spot highlights. That's a bunch of text messages. Let's see what that's about. It could be from one of 3 people, so let's check that real quick. I did some photography for a realtor earlier today, so I'm hoping that's the payment. And it's not. Alright, well that's cool. Let's see what my friend here's got to say to me. Wait, what? Wow. Okay. All right, so we are starting to lose our blue here to the test of time, so I'm going to try and rescue this thing, throwing water back in it. If not, we can just remix. It's all good, but I'd rather not have it just crap out on us. Now, if this was a display level paint job, if I was really going all out, after we applied these brighter highlights, what I would be doing is then going back in with a mid-tone to connect them to the shade. But we're not going to do that. It's a little bit too much. For our fun, spooktacular special here we're doing today. Trying to keep it light and spooky. That was a little bit too big of a highlight there, but you know what? I'm not going to freak out about that. We'll dot it out. Just like that. We'll just do that. Make it look intentional right there. All right. So now we'll focus on this dude. Alright, so for this basic uplight, highlight, back to base color type of deal, we're doing pretty good. We're almost to the point of completion on that. So in total, this would be a little 2-hour paint job. That's not too bad. At least for the level of the effect that we're achieving. All right. So why don't we give that final gray mix a little test run here. So we've got this Wolf Gray from Vallejo. Gonna mix it with Quick Shade. 2 drops of Quick Shade, 2 drops of water. I'm just gonna drop my brush into it already with that blue pigment. It should be all right. All right. Mix it up. Oh yeah, we're dealing with ultra thin here. There's the color for you. All right, thumb test. Here we go. Let's try it out. Looks dope to me. Bam, 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 boy. All right. Let's go in with these ultra highlights. Right up on the skull noggins. Oh yeah, this is gonna be perfect. I can tell already. Now, what we don't want is to use this highlight color anywhere but on broad surfaces. That way it really will keep its kind of like scarcity in the paint color, or at least the paint scheme. Now it is kind of hard to pick apart here on camera, but it is that white exclusively. You can see, there you go. If I knock out that little shadow, it's a lot brighter. It's going on there as smooth as butter as well, since we're employing the quick shade wash with it. So we're only putting this on the thicker highlight points, wider parts of the tendrils, etc., etc. This process shouldn't take long, and it's going to take it to the next level for us. We really just want the skulls to be white. Well, it's not even white, right? I mean, it's gray. But it's going to look so chroma intense compared to the other colors that it will appear to be white, which is a good effect to pull off. So if you're just now joining, thanks for hanging out today. We're just working on these spooky spirit hosts, working on the secondary highlight color here, which the way that I do my commissions, one highlight color from the base color is just my tabletop level, 2 highlight colors is my second level, and then anything over than that is the top level. So this would just be a heroic tier paint job, tier 2. Nothing insane. I think it looks pretty good. I'm hoping it looks pretty good. If it's your first time seeing my streams, I usually stream every single day, Monday through Friday, while I work on commission work. Today I just wanted to paint something spooky for Halloween. I've got a commission in the mail right now headed my way that I'll be working on this week. And that'll be fun. It's something I've never painted before, so it's always good to do something new. All right, I think we're pretty much there on those. I I think on the weapons, I'm going to paint them completely in this color. And then I'll just do a wash. Possibly just a gray wash or something. To really have them differentiate between the rest of the model. So that way they'll look like they're really, really, really bright. So let that dry here for a second. Actually, I can just put the whole fan on this guy because we're pretty much done. Turn my fan on. Whoops, bumping the camera. Sorry. Alright. So while that dries, I may go ahead and apply the dull coat on it. Because I can still ink after the dull coat, so that's fine. Just to seal it up. So we're going to use the Army Painter. Whoa, it's too tall. Army Painter Anti-Shine. Best one out there if you ask me. And again, it's really cold outside, so that's why I'm not going out to spray. I usually only like to spray on big jobs anyway, so. The brush on's really great because it does help smooth out your brush work. So I'm just gonna go in and apply it. Plus anywhere that's still shiny from the base coat that we did with the gloss varnish first before the washes will now be matte. And it will be sealed. Looking good. Really melding together all the effects that we've used. That's the one nice thing about clear coat. It does a really awesome job of doing that. At least the kind from Army Painter. I haven't actually, I've used Vallejo's matte varnish, the brush on, and it just didn't do a good job killing the shine. But the Army Painter anti-shine seems to be like actual magic, so that's why I use it. Dries really fast as well, so you're not waiting forever and ever for it to calm down after you apply it. Especially since I'm applying it with a fan turned on at the same time. I mean, it's like instantaneous. Just slapping this on here, nice and quick. The weapon color that we applied is dry as well, so as soon as I'm done with this, we can go and finish that. Nice. Alright, so this is already drying perfectly. Just tying together those brush strokes a tad bit more. Alright, so we had the white weapons, or at least the super duper gray. What I'm going to do here is just use that same deep taupe color, but this time a tad, like literal tiny bit right there, as you can see. I'm going to drop on the quick shade medium. Add water, dirty water, direct from the dirty paint water. Not clean. And that'll be good for what we're looking for. So I'm just going to apply it with the fan turned on. I don't really care at this point because it should work just fine. Apply it to the other side. we'll let that dry. But all it's gonna do is a super light color on there. So, a hour-and-a-half paint job. Looks pretty good. Not bad. Obviously the base needs to be finished. The skeleton guy can be worked on. But otherwise, pretty pleased with the effect we were able to get. Again, if it's your first time watching the stream, feel free to like the page. I stream every single day, Monday through Friday. If you ever need a commission, feel free to ask for a quote. I also have a Patreon that I run that has tutorials, classes, all kinds of stuff like that that usually goes along with my methods I use for commission work. And yeah, thanks for hanging out today. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you have a good Halloween, and I will catch all of you guys tomorrow. After the stream is completed as well, I'll upload it to YouTube, so you'll be able to check it out in 1080p as well. Thanks so much. Appreciate you.